Hello and welcome to All in Motion. I am your host, Jake Harrison. Thank you all for taking the time to tune in. This is a special holiday two-part interview, episode 10, Independent Women. I am very excited for our next guest. One of my favorite reasons is because growing up as a kid, I remember I used to love the Howard Stern show, and this woman worked on the Howard Stern show. She's also been on Home and Garden Television, and she has a very extensive background, not just in sales, but real estate. Ladies and gentlemen, Jackie Winter. Jackie, it's a pleasure.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing this evening?
Good, good, good. A correction, I sold ads for the Howard Stern show.
I know, but I want to put you on blast. Okay.
Oh,
I know you like that. No, you and I, it took us a couple times to get here. So I just want to thank you again for being so patient and giving All in Motion the time. I really do appreciate it. We really do appreciate it. Before we get started, you work for a powerhouse real estate firm. I won't get into the details like you and I spoke about, but really quickly, before we get into the topic, um, give us being COVID and kind of getting out of it. Give us kind of like an idea. What's the real estate market like? And I mean, it's different in every market throughout the United States, and even outside the states. Give us some context if you don't mind me asking.
well, I sell in Los Angeles, which is a big deal because there's nowhere in the country where you can go to a one state and have all four seasons in one day. So, that's what makes California so special. If you want to go and lay out in the sun and the beach, you can at the same day. You can drive to the desert, or in the same day, you can go up the mountain and ski if you want to. Um, or if you want to have some Central Coast weather, you can do that too. So, uh, you know, California is a very very unique, very beautiful state. The topography here is like none other.
That's awesome. My
So,
mom, I'm
your
sorry, go ahead,
question
Jen.
with regards to sales in during COVID, it's been very good. It's been excellent. It's been, multiple offers. It's a seller's market, um, but also, for buyers, the interest rates are so low that it's cheap to borrow money. So it's been good.
You haven't found it challenging. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I live outside of the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. I own a condo in Alexandria, and from the friends that I do have in the real estate market here, they're telling me. I mean, it's a seller's market. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie.
It is, for
Do you
sure.
think, and is that true across the rest of the United States, or is that in certain pockets in metropolitan or big cities across the states?
Well, what's happening is that this whole BS about people having to be in an office and work. If it's one thing COVID did was refute that nonsense. I mean, you don't have to be in an office to be productive. And in fact, I have a client who is a president of a big company in New York City. And she, along with the board, after having shut down for several months, realized that, you know what, we're saving $16 million a year in rent, insurance, vendor affiliated costs, all the other nonsense that goes along with it. We'd be better off taking that money and putting it in a really strong um, uh, remote infrastructure. And so, in answer to your question, what that has done is it's given employees choices. Um, Instead of being cramped up in a two-bedroom apartment in Manhattan, spending all kinds of rent that's ridiculous. Now these people are being able to buy homes in the DMV area or somewhere down south. In fact, she was telling me that one of the employees was like thanking her and the company for making that decision, because he said for the first time he sees he's got his two kids playing in their own backyard. I think they moved to Tennessee somewhere. So what's happening is these secondary markets are seeing an explosion of people coming in from New York and San Francisco, LA, all the major, urban cities. Now that they've got choices and they're buying homes, I mean, it's compelling when you know that you can own a home and you're paying and you have all the attributes of owning a home, and like spending maybe $200 more for your mortgage than you were cramped up in a crappy apartment somewhere in some urban city. You know what I mean? So COVID has proven that the norm, this nonsense, this institutionalized, you know, mind stuff that they've been giving people about, oh, you have to be in an office. You don't have to be in an office. You can be just as productive at home as, in fact, you're actually working harder at home. So that's been a good thing. So the secondary markets have seen an explosion. I mean, you're looking at like Houston, the prices of homes have gone up exponentially. People are coming in with cash. People have cashed out in their, homes in the urban cities and coming in with cash. You look at Boise, Idaho. They don't want to see us. They don't want to see California plates there. But so secondary markets have been benefiting for a long time, and the smart ones have actually reached out to people in these urban cities and saying, hey, you can come out here for $236,000. You got all this land and, that kind of thing. So it's been a good thing all around.
That's awesome. Hey, so just want to briefly touch on the topic, since that's what we're speaking about. For you, and to educate not just women but men, the title and topic, independent women or woman, what does that mean for you through growing up? And then we'll get in some of the questions in your background in the industry, and what does that mean, and how powerful is that to you?
What does it mean growing up as a little girl? Seeing, the women in our family handling their business, hardworking women. Some have gone to school, some didn't, but they were very enterprising. At the same time that they were very independent, they were very much a wife, a mother, sacrificing themselves and a lot more to see their family make it. And so, that has been a big influence to me growing up. My mom, went back to school while she was taking care of three kids, and was always determined to make a good life for her kids and herself. Her husband, my father, and but at the same time, I mean, she was at home. She made meals for us. She cleaned and she did everything. So that was an influence for me, not just for my mom, but my grandmother and aunts and stuff like that. As a woman, as an adult woman, it's a blessing and a curse to be an independent woman.
Why a curse?
Because from a personal standpoint, when you're out here dating men, they say they like independent women, but they really, a lot of them don't. What they want to do is try to control your narrative and control your movement. Like they admire your drive and your tenacity. At least that's what they say, until they get into your personal space and they see what it takes. And sometimes they can be intimidated. Professionally, look, like any other independent woman, I mean, you work hard, but for a Black woman, it doesn't matter what you achieved yesterday. You always have to keep proving yourself every single day.
You answered all my questions. I guess we're done. No, Jackie, I love you. You answered. I asked the question. It's like you answered all the questions. I'm kidding. No, no, that I know, Jackie. We talk offline. You're a wonderful woman. No, it leads right into the next one, and I just want to give the audience a little bit of context. If you don't mind me asking, where are you from? Where did you grow up? And what was that like? So it's a three-part question, just to give the audience an idea who you are, where you're from, and where you grew up at originally.
I was born in the Bronx. Grew up on 187th and Valentine Avenue for a few years. I was born at the Albert Einstein School of Medicine um, in 1967. To parents, my father, Juan, was born in Cuba, and my mother, Winston, was born in Jamaica. They met each other in New York City. My father was a shop foreman in a manufacturing company owned by Hasidic Jews. My mom was a part-time bookkeeper there, and she was 19. My father was about 32, 33. He was a widower. His first wife died from complications from lupus. She was also pregnant. So my father, at that time when he met my mom, was a widower. Anyway, so somebody there said, "Oh, you got to meet, my mom because she's from Jamaica." My father also was raised in Jamaica too after he left Cuba. So they met each other, and the rest is history. They dated for 5 years, and uh, they got married in '66, and the rest is history. They have 3 kids together. My father has a son from a previous relationship, even before his first marriage. So my father had 4 kids technically, but between him and my mom, we had 3. Myself, I'm the eldest, my brother, and my sister.
What was it like
And
growing?
then we moved to New Jersey. I'm sorry, we moved to New Jersey. My father ended up owning several men's clothing stores, and he named them after me. Jackie's Men's Shop. My father was a master tailor, and he made clothes for some notable, legendary names in sports and entertainment and politics and stuff like that. He was known for that. And so after the riots of Newark, like many of the major cities in the United States, there was an outreach to get Black businesses, uh, on the forefront. And, this whole new concept called the mall was developing. And, my father being my father, somebody said to him, "Oh, you couldn't open up a store in the mall," basically saying because it's a Black owned business. And my father being, someone who you didn't tell him no, and you couldn't tell him that he couldn't because he was Black, my father was able to, through his connections, reach the governor of New Jersey. And from that point on, my father had a store, a Black owned store in Woodbridge Mall. And from what he says, and it could be true, that he was the first Black owned, store in the country, in a major mall. So that's how we got to Newark, New Jersey. I grew up in North Newark. Very few Blacks, a lot of Italians, a lot of Irish. I was raised Roman Catholic until I denounced it in the age of 16, the Basilica of Sacred Heart in Newark, New Jersey. And the rest is history.
It's interesting you bring up the Bronx. I had 3, 4 episodes ago, I had a good friend, Juan. He was on here, an excellent interview. Could you shed light? And I know there's a little age difference there. Bronx compared to the South Bronx, is there a big distinction in your own opinion from what you remember growing up there? Because he grew up there and it was very tough and difficult. And he's Hispanic, and he told me, he shared with our audience an amazing, powerful story. So it's interesting when I have another guest like yourself, growing up in that area and want to get your take on it, and what that was like, from what you can remember.
From what I can remember, I remember the Grand Concourse where you know, as a little girl, I kind of remember, there were a lot of Hasidic Jews. They wear all the black, and they would sit out in the Grand Concourse on the benches and have conversations and talk. Where we grew up in the Bronx, that part of the Bronx at the time, it was a neighborhood. It wasn't the South Bronx that you see, the torn South Bronx that you saw on the news and stuff like that. A lot of that too were people who owned those buildings that basically burnt it down themselves because of insurance money they wanted to get.
Right.
That was a lot of that going on too. So, there was that part of the Bronx, and then there was a part that I grew up in that, was changing actually at the time. And so I don't remember everything, but I do remember the Grand Concourse. I do remember Yankee Stadium was not too far. I do remember certain things, and it was a neighborhood at the time. But it wasn't that part of the South Bronx that it was two different worlds.
And Juan and I spoke briefly about it, and I want to get, I don't want to bring the news, and I want to get your opinion because this is your interview, Jackie. Why, looking back on it, and this is just your own personal opinion. From what you can remember, your family remembers, they always said the Bronx was on fire. From what you remember, or your family, what do you think that was? What was, in your opinion, your family, what was that about?
The statement that the Bronx is on fire?
Correct.
But, well, parts of it was on fire. I mean,
not to be joking around, but no, seriously. I mean,
there are parts of the Bronx that
right.
were serious. In the drugs, look, back in the 70s, you cannot tell me anything otherwise. You cannot tell me that the police did not put drugs and set up drugs in those neighborhoods. No black person or Spanish people were flying private planes from, someplace in South America or wherever, flying and dropping, bags, blocks of cocaine. They weren't. That was being brought to those neighborhoods, and it was really for sport. You know what I mean? So, like with many urban cities around the United States at that time, and it's just so strange that every urban city that was predominantly Black or Hispanic were always plagued with the same thing, the crack cocaine. And if I had to put my last check on it, I would think that it was an infiltration from law enforcement and our government.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So let's get right into it about you. Your last 20, 25 years, could you let the audience know what that was like for you in your career?
Well, in 93, my father passed away from pancreatic cancer.
I'm sorry.
So, I loved him to death, and, never thought he could die. But he did. And I just wanted a change of scenery. So I came back to California. I went to school out here. And then when I was done, I came back to New York, and I stayed in New York for several years, and I worked at Reader's Digest, a magazine called American Health Magazine, and then moved on to CBS Music, which became Sony Music. And I ended up working through various labels there in various roles, and then came to Los Angeles in 94 and worked around, but then worked at Motown with my girlfriend, who was a product manager there. And I knew her from New York City, but then ended up back at CBS, but not music, at CBS Radio through a connect of mine. And actually worked in sales for a news format, and then ended up working for, I think it's KLSX, which aired the Howard show. So I was responsible for selling ads for Howard, and he was just, I give a lot of respect. That man is a
what was that like, Jackie?
I never met him, but it was wonderful because he has and still does one of the richest demographic. And people ask me, what's his demo? And I said, everybody,
And what do
every
you think?
age,
What do you
every
and
color.
we spoke about it briefly, and I just want to interject. What about his work ethic? And this is not just for young women and men, but what about him? And I know you and I spoke about it. What was about his work ethic that really inspired you?
Consistency. He was always consistent. With all the salespeople around the country that sold ads for him, he, first of all, um, one of my favorite words will describe him. He's always willing. The willingness to read ads. After he did his show, he would stay hours after the show and read ads, no matter how big, how small. It could be a business in the Appalachia mountains, to some major corporation in Silicon Valley. It didn't matter. He read those ads because a huge part of the allure was that, again, everybody on all economic levels of all races, all educational levels, no matter what they did as a job, from CEOs on down to the janitors, okay, they loved Howard. And so people wanted to hear their ad with Howard's voice on it. And he knew that. And he never ever disappointed us. We always could, as salespeople, assure our accounts Howard's going to read it. And that was uh, a way for us as salespeople to establish confidence and trust on the other end of the table when it comes to our clients. When we say he's going to do it, that was huge. It's huge, and the man had he has that demographic. It's amazing.
And I know you to get to where you're at now, and we'll get into that here briefly. You spent a lot of time selling ads, and I remember you and I spoke briefly about it. There's three in particular companies. I don't want to say because I want you to, and if you don't mind sharing with the audience, could you kind of go into those three companies I remember? And I remember you sold the ads, and I remember you said if you would have, they weren't yours personally, but if you would have held and sold them today,
Oh,
could
the domain names, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Well, so when I was selling ads for Howard Stern, I got a call once from a guy named Charlie McElfish, who was the head of business development for Idealab. And Idealab at the time, this whole internet space was brand new in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was the wild, wild west. And he called and wanted me to come to his office to talk about, you know, the demo for Howard and everything and its reach and everything, because, they were thinking about a whole marketing plan, and this was one possibility. So I did go. I went. Major VC company. They incubated a lot of startups, and very impressive. I mean, when I went there were lines literally down the block, around the corner. Um, and I'm not talking about some little block. I'm talking about long blocks of people. So I went in there and sat down with him, and introduced the whole package and why Howard and everything. So anyway, we had a good meeting, and he said that he was going to get back to me in about another week or so, and he did. And he said to me that um, they've had a change of plans as far as the direction they want to go in advertisement. However, he said that he was very impressed with my presentation and wanted to know, would I be interested in a business development position somewhere within the VC company, the umbrella. And I took a chance for a number of reasons. It would have been an automatic in, as opposed to standing online and dropping off a resume. And it was this whole wild thing called internet, you know. So I took a chance, and I just jumped in. I took advantage of it. and they had me, selling for different incubators. And one in particular was a very, very raw, but actually they really were ahead of themselves, um, with data mining, because again, this was a whole new world, and these companies had to measure, um, uh, their audience, and pretty much take into account where their user base is going, and how many clicks are they going, and that kind of stuff. And there was no real data for it. So there was a company, that the Idea Lab, incubated, called Free PC, which people would get a free computer with the understanding that we would be pretty much observing where they navigated, what they bought, how much, when, what time, things of that nature. And companies were really, they were really geeked about it, because that was a great way to get insight on people's behavior pattern when it comes to navigating through this wild thing called internet. And so, um, the company got bought out by, eventually got bought out by an independent manufacturing computer company out of Irvine, which then eventually they got bought out by Gateway Computers. So when the merger took place, they did get rid of a good portion of people because they had theirs down in Irvine, but they kept me, because of my sales numbers. And so I would have to drive from Hollywood to Irvine every day. And
It's
so,
far. It's very far.
yeah, so there was a guy there
Wow.
who was head of sales called Brian Firestone, who said, "Look, I don't know what I'm going to do with you, but I'll figure it out. But in the meantime, there's some intellectual properties that the company had that we don't know what to do with it. And so if you
Mm.
if you can sell these, that would be great." And I didn't even know what it was. And so when he presented it to me, he says,
And that interrupt you, Jackie. What year and time is this again? If you can remember.
this has got to be about 99, maybe.
Okay. Okay. So 1999. Okay.
Yeah, somewhere. I think it is somewhere around there.
Okay.
And so, he says, just tell me what you want as a commission. And I told him I'll take 50%. He goes, "That's fine." And so,
Wow. Oh, look at you. All the and
well, I
not
didn't know
just
what it
women.
was, so
That's a
I
that's a
didn't know.
big commission though, right? 50%'s
Well, I
not
didn't know
bad.
what it was. I didn't know what it
Okay.
was. And
Okay.
so when he gave me the domain names, it was porn.com, guide.com, and rent.com.
Now porn.com. So audience now porn is in pornography, Jackie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. And
Wow. Okay. Okay.
so I sold uh, porn.com to an international porn company in Europe.
And that was Germany, I think I remember, right?
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And then I sold guide.com to TV Guide in New York City.
Okay.
And then rent.com, which is now, I think, apartments.com. Uh,
Wow. I know
that,
apartments.com for sure.
yeah,
Everybody.
yeah, yeah. That was the
Now,
mother.
now,
Uh,
Jackie, how much? Let's give the audience some context. If you had if you could do it, let's say okay, almost 2022, correct?
mhm.
In about a month, if you would have sold them, and I'm not trying to, just to give the audience like again some content, what do you think you could have sold them for? And even though they weren't yours technically, but you created the deals, you did the legwork, you did the correct me if I'm wrong, you did the proposals, right?
Yeah, we had an attorney do that,
Well, attorney, but you played a big role in that.
Yeah.
How much do you think for each? If today in today's economy, inflation, factor in inflation, things of that nature.
Honestly, I don't know if porn.com would have valuated as high as it did, back then, only because now it's been kind of bleached out with all of these other, YouPorn and all these other sites that, you know what I mean? Like everybody's doing their own porn right now. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right, 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 right.
So
Yep, yep,
maybe
yep.
try to get a little bit more, but for sure, rent.com, shit. I would have probably driven that to 70, 80, maybe even 100 million. Knowing me, I would go for 100.
Wow, look at you. And this is the going back to the topic, independent. I don't just say independent women, but
God, I
I
think I could.
mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head, Jackie. No, I'm serious. I
Yeah.
mean, you were that driven. And then the last one, excuse me, I apologize. The last one was you said was
Guide.com. Again,
guide.com.
At the time, I don't know how much more I could have gotten for Guide because, then this is when you started, like HBO and all these live streaming. It might have gotten more money, but nothing would have given me that kind of valuation as rent.
And okay, so you sold these, or you were the lead in sales for these three.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That money, and you and I spoke briefly about it, what did you do with that commission?
I bought an apartment building.
And where was that at?
In LA.
And that was we're saying about beginning 2000s, right? After somewhere around there. Okay.
Yep.
And do you still own those buildings or that building?
No, that one I sold.
And to give audience some context, especially like I said about independent women, and not just independent women, but business. What it was obviously very lucrative for you, right? And it was your and it was your it was such an accomplishment, right? You were very young at the time. And it had to be very rewarding. And then obviously the sale too, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it was. And then after that, my boss gave me the international department for the company because nobody was really paying attention to it. You have to remember back then you had the big boxes like Best Buy, which is, to me, barely hanging in there. But you had Circuit City, you had the warehouse.
Circuit City went out of business, Jackie, right? I think they're bankrupt, right?
Yeah, they've been gone. But you had all those big electronic boxes, and so national sales was always focused. But sale really wasn't. So they gave me the international sales department, and they asked me, well, I think it was moving maybe 27,000 units at the time, and they said, listen, try to figure this out. The job is twofold. You have to help to open up, or identify and open up retail stores internationally, and you also have to procure these parts to make these computers. I didn't even know what procure meant. You know what I mean? I just said, okay. I knew nothing about computers. I knew nothing about procurement. I knew nothing. Zero.
And Jackie, you just really literally walked into this. You opened the door to this topic. As a woman, the competition had to be crazy because for the most part,
there was no competition. There
was not. Internationally, it wasn't?
No. What I was competing with were the white men in my office who resented the fact that I got this department and didn't know a damn thing about it. And I thought that I could, get help from them. I didn't get any help from them. What I got was disdain. Where I got my help was from the Koreans and the Koreans and all the other manufacturers that helped me because, you see, they were getting a cold shoulder from certain executives too. So I was sort of like the messenger. So at the end of the day, they helped me and I helped them. So I had a couple of weeks of crash course on how to procure parts and manufacturing.
Wow, you wore multiple hats. You wore.
Yeah, and they introduced me to the powers that be in some of these major retail stores around the world.
Wow, look at that. And do you feel though the men in your department, it sounds like they were envious and jealous? Would you agree with that?
No, I don't think it was envy or jealousy. I think it was just uh, they were put off at the fact that um, I knew nothing about computers, but I got this department. But the department was sitting there empty. If anybody wanted it, they could have taken it. I think they definitely, for some, because I was Black and a woman, and I had nothing in common with them. And these are men that live down in Orange County. Their little Corvettes and stuff was basically, I used to call it their dick extensions. They played golf on the weekend.
Jackie,
and they were married.
I'm trying to be vulgar on this podcast. Please elaborate with the dick extension. We're trying to, because we do know there's somewhat of a younger audience. Please tell me the Corvette, the analogy or
well, it used to be so funny because I think it was every Monday or Tuesday. I think it was Monday. We'd have to sit in the executive board meetings, and they're all saying the same damn thing about their golfing at the golf course over the weekend and what car and their kids and everybody, oh, what you do, and they're all talking about what they did. And no one asked me, because if you asked me, I'd been like, I was in the club, last night, some house party. Nobody wants to talk to me about what I do, because my world is completely different. As a single woman, and I don't have a husband, right. Kids. I'm not running up and down, none of that. And they were always into their cars and changing their cars, and everybody had the car, and I called it a dick extension because that's all it was basically.
Now, also give audience context in these meetings, sales meetings. Would you say you're probably one of the only few women in these meetings?
There were 3 women, myself, another woman was national sales. She was tremendous in HR.
And we're talking about between, even the given meeting, I'm correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming between 30 to 50 people in this meeting?
On average, it would be about 12-ish.
Okay, so a little bit less than that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so nobody was asking me what I was doing over the weekend, because I'm at
you weren't driving a Corvette. You had better things to do, right?
I was driving a Volkswagen Beetle. That's what I was. Jack, and I would be at Club Deep, on Sunday house music. So nobody was asking me.
You were pulling up the club with the Beetle, right? You didn't give it. Yep. Hey, you were doing you, right?
I was doing me.
Jackie, I love it. So, Jackie, seriously, and sales, and we're gonna move forward, into what you do now. But I had my own sales experience, but I want to hear from you. Do you agree, disagree? Not mandatory, like some country. I'm not gonna get in the military topic, but do you? My different sales positions, sales jobs. One of my first jobs down here, we're working for a company called Meridian Imaging. They do hardware and outsource IT solutions. And people thought I was crazy. The territory that I chose was downtown DC, and and right when I say K Street, you know exactly the type of firms I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
All international law firms with a sign right on the window, smack, no solicitation. Do you believe, and what would you say to young people that are just getting out of either college or starting their career? Is sales important from your own experience? Does it really, really help in longevity in terms of when you transition? Should everybody have a sales background to really? Because I believe personally, I shared this with someone else. You learn how to, number one, you learn how to speak, articulate, and you learn who the gatekeeper is. And then if you learn a gatekeeper, then you meet the decision maker. You correct me if I'm wrong. Do you believe everybody should have that sort of experience growing up before they really get into their career?
Not everybody is a salesperson. I think more than that, I think people should be taught in school things like emotional intelligence.
That's deep. That's deep.
Tactical empathy. I think that is very important. Listening to people and their needs, and trying to be as full service as you can in life, not just in sales. So like I said, not everybody is a salesperson, but I think schools should be teaching those things rather than all the mundane stuff that means nothing when you go out in the world.
Right, right. And then, and, a follow up to that question, that experience for you personally, um, how has it shaped you, changed you, made you the woman you are today?
Well, I don't take no for an answer until I've exhausted all possibilities. And that can be a blessing and a burden. But I have had experiences where people sound very confident in what they're saying when they're trying to explain something to you. Or especially when it comes to like, you know, accessibility or, reach or anything. But then when I listen to them, and I usually go by my gut, and I don't, and if I feel like they're giving me an answer just to get rid of me, I usually am the kind of person that will seek out the answer myself. And I have so far, most of the time that I've done that, I've always, my instincts were right. And a few times that it wasn't. Um, if it's one thing that sales has taught me is that you put more, the more you put in, the more you get out. The more you seek uh, knowledge and retain it for yourself so that you can use it when you need it, it benefits you in the long run. Um, and so I've never been able to just be satisfied with what people give me as an answer. As you know, if I'm not happy with it, I want to be able to get what I want, and 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 feel like I earned it. I don't
Right.
know if that makes sense. But
No, it makes perfect sense, and it leads right in to the next question. And I wanted to ask you, for young, not just young women, but especially young Black women, being women, African American. And we see, and it's coming from a Jewish background. It's very sad. In your opinion, do you feel as I do, our country is very divided right now, or divided to some extent?
um, the country has always been divided. It's just more
Right.
pronounced at this point right now. Um, you know, it's just what's happening is that you know the blue collar jobs have all gone to other countries, and it has been like
Right. Yeah,
30,
that's true.
40 years.
We
And
outsource, right? Look at Detroit. I mean, I'm not to
yeah,
cut you off, but I mean, look at Detroit, right? Can we speak about that for a minute? I mean, booming city back in what, the 40s and 50s, even the 60s. I was there, for a show, and it's sad. You see all these homes. I mean, you could buy 10 homes for probably 100 grand, Jackie.
yeah.
And it's just sad to see our country. I mean, this was the mecca when it comes to the audio industry and all of the world.
Well, I mean, you're right, and but it's transcended into other genre of manufacturing, and
Correct, correct.
you
You're
know,
right about
we
that. Right.
because we've sold out our people, and we've built China's middle class, we've built India's middle class, and you know, what was it? A couple of days ago in the Washington Post, um, a Stockholm based think tank, a very world renowned one called the International Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance, basically said that for the first time in its history, America is on their list as a democracy on the downslide. Uh,
Mm.
a lot of white people, blue
Can
collar
you
white people, have lost
can
their jobs, and so now they're competing with the what would be the untouchables, the black and the Hispanics, and so now they're all on the same boat. And so everybody's fighting for the same thing. So this is why the narrative is about America is divided. America's always been divided. It's nothing new.
And that leads me, it kind of leads me into what you do currently in your profession, if you don't mind sharing.
I am a real estate agent. I co-own a property management company. I am an investor. And that's what I do primarily.
Right. And I know, obviously, you and I spoke to certain things you can and can't speak about, we do respect that. And that leads me into, you already kind of brought it up, young Black women. And the reason why I asked this question is because I had the great honor for Veterans Day as a good friend of mine. He's African American. He's a master sergeant, and he was in the military. And I asked him the same question, and he didn't experience it. Have you, in your career, and going back even in the sales, have you, as an African American woman, have you experienced any discrimination? And if you have, how would you advise young Black women that are trying to, I don't like to say compete, because it all should be fair, right? But there is competition between men and women, and even in Black women makes it, and correct me if makes it more difficult. What advice would you say to young Black women that want to get into either real estate, what you do, or in any other type of industry, on how to, dodge and duck and weave and be successful at the same time?
Well, for any Black person that wants to go into corporate America, do know that, you got to walk in with realistic expectations. And the realistic expectation is that, the macro and microaggressions that Black people suffer with in corporate America, it plagues on your mental wellness. And so I would say to anybody, get in, learn as much as you can quickly, have a goal. What is your goal? If you want to be an entrepreneur in a certain, space, professional space, get into these corporations and learn as much as you can. And if you feel like you need to jump and go to another company to get, more education, you must have a plan, because the reality is that you may not last in corporate America that long. And this whole thing about, you're going to stay in corporate America and you're going to rise up, you're going to, climb that corporate ladder. That ladder is not for you. Very rarely do you see Black CEOs. Look, I'm not saying it can happen, but it will. You have to manage your expectations that it likely won't. And you've got to be able to have, as a Black person, a plan B, C, D, and E. And if I were to advise anyone, particularly Black people, no matter what form of business you get yourself into, buy properties, just own things, because there's nothing more than telling somebody you quit because they're annoying you, but knowing that you have additional resources of funds that you can tap into. That gives you the freedom to make those choices. And the thing is, when you're in corporate America, you must never, ever, ever, ever forget who you are. And it's something that my father instilled in us as a Black Caribbean, a Black Cuban. He really emphasized, and I will say this, and again, not to be offensive to anybody, but my father always said, whatever that you achieve in life, you must never ever forget that America will look at you in such a way that if you were to become a nurse, you are a nigger who's a nurse. If you were the number one salesperson in the company, you're a nigger who's the number one salesperson in the company. If you became the CEO of a company, you're a nigger who's the CEO of a company. What he was trying to tell us is that you must never, ever forget that you don't, even though you achieve these things, you're not really playing ball with these people. You've got to always understand that what's good for the goose is not good for the Black person. That you must never ever forget who you are and why you're there. He says, because once you start forgetting that is when all hell breaks loose for you. And he is absolutely right. And so, you must never be comfortable. Again, you must always have a plan B, C, D, E, and F. And you better have all your ducks in a row, because at any moment you could be gone. You could be removed. And so, yeah, my father's was spot on with that one.
Wow. And I know you and I spoke about that.
Doesn't matter how much education you get. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They just, the first thing they'll say is, oh, you got it on affirmative action. That bullshit. When the fact is that white women are the biggest recipient of affirmative action than any other group. So, those kind of things. So, yeah.
Excuse me. No, that, and we spoke about that before. And I want to say thank you for sharing that, Jackie. I really do mean that. Seriously, that was deep. And thank you. I mean that. Jackie, thank you so much for stopping by All Emotion. Really do appreciate it. And I know All Emotion audience really, really enjoyed and cannot wait until next Friday, December 31st, New Year's Eve, for part 2 to come out. If you're new to All Emotion, please be sure to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and YouTube. You can also access other platforms on Linktree/All Emotion Podcast. You can also follow us on our Instagram for weekly posts, All Emotion Podcast. Every week we have amazing guests that are on. We post amazing posts about them, so please check it out. And also, going into 2022, I'm very excited. Definitely have that mailing list going, and I'm really excited about the website and then having all the guests up there with their episodes. So again, thank you from All Emotion. Happy holidays and be safe. And this is Jake, and we'll see you next Friday, December 31st.